There is still, as yet, no absolute proof that the passengers were on board when it crashed.
Even though it took us a whole year to go up there and fight and ask, we still don't have no answers.
The reality is that darkness kills.
Tens of thousands of people marched through Algeria's capital in the biggest demonstration since protests started 3 weeks ago. 7 members of parliament from the president's own party resigned today, joining calls for him to step down. 82-year-old Abdelaziz Bouteflika has been rarely seen in public since he had a stroke in 2013 and is now in Geneva to get treatment. But last month, he declared he'd run for a 5th term. White House Communications Director Bill Shine resigned today to take what looks like a promotion, senior advisor to President Trump's 2020 campaign. Shine used to be the head of Fox News. His departure means that in just 2 years, Trump's run through 5 communications directors. Most of Venezuela is still without electricity after a massive blackout last night knocked out phone networks, the internet, and subway systems. Commuters were forced to pack into buses, and power has only been restored to a few neighborhoods in the capital. President Nicolas Maduro blamed the U.S., saying Americans want to sabotage him with a, quote, electrical war. His opposition says the government didn't maintain the grid. On International Women's Day, players on the U.S. women's soccer team filed a gender discrimination lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation, seeking new salaries and back pay. Despite actually winning World Cups, ranking first in the world, and boasting the most watched soccer game in American history, women's team players make less than men when they win a game.
California may have a reputation as a liberal bastion, but it's long been one of the most secretive states when it comes to the police. A new law seeks to change that. SB 1421 requires police departments to make available long protected files of officer misconduct, including sexual assault and falsifying evidence. And it unseals internal records of what happened during police shootings.
Without a doubt, it is a tough job. But just because a job is tough doesn't give you free rein to kill people.
That's a big win for the families of victims of police violence, as long as the law holds up.
Videos, the prostitute, nothing.
Okay, my name is Mary William, and I'm the grandmother of Keith Bursey. Keith was killed by LAPD June 10th, 2016.
Hello, I'm Miss Fazia Almaru. I'm the mother of Kenneth Ross Jr., who was murdered by Gardena police on April 11th, 2018.
I'm Trisha Michael, the twin sister of Keisha Michael. I just appreciate everybody.
Trisha Michael's been waiting 3 years for an opportunity like this. She's filling out a Freedom of Information request for records from the Inglewood Police Department about her sister's death.
The title of this says, Request for Public Records regarding the February 21st, 2016 murder of Keisha Michael. Sound good?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Police found Keisha passed out in a car at 3 a.m. An hour later, she was dead, shot more than a dozen times. The police claim she had a gun, but 5 of the cops were later fired, and the city settled a wrongful death suit for $8.6 million. The 5 officers are now suing over their dismissal. Trisha says what really happened remains a mystery for her and the 3 young children her sister left behind.
I was always smaller than my sister. Mm-hmm. A little skinnier face. Her face was a little chunky. And then she smiled a lot.
You're just blowing right past this picture.
I don't know, but we Disneyed out.
You're Disneyed out, definitely.
Right.
Right. Keisha was always smiling.
Yeah.
2 months after the law was supposed to go into effect, courts are still deciding how it will work. California's powerful police unions argue SB 1421 shouldn't apply to records from before this year. Ron Hernandez leads one of the first unions to sue.
Well, initially, before the bill was passed, we actually challenged it because we just didn't feel that getting deputies or officers' personal information out there, just, carte blanche type thing, was the right way to go. Now, what we're concerned about is the retroactivity. The reason the retroactivity concerns us is because prior to this, there was a different set of rules. So you might have a circumstance where an accusation was made. And depending on what the accusation made, the process of fighting it might have been worse, just having your name thrown out there, even though you were determined to be innocent of the accusation at the end, just the dragging out of the whole process.
What you're saying is that in the past, deputies might have made different decisions about how they challenged a disciplinary process, for example, under the assumption that these records would never come out to the public.
Correct. That's exactly right. We think it would be fair that everybody knows from here forward that this new rule should apply going forward as opposed to stuff of the past.
State Senator Nancy Skinner says that's just a misreading of the law.
The union's lawsuits, they're contending that this law should not and is not meant to be applied retroactively. What was your intent?
So I don't even use that term. Retroactive is not an appropriate term here. What SB 1421 did was modify California Public Records Act. California's Public Records Act deals with a record is a record. And if you, a public agency, are in receipt of a record that is legally disclosable, it does not matter when that record was created. It is disclosable.
What do you think the unions are doing? I mean, are they just sort of grappling and grasping for ways to kind of avoid having to comply with this law?
They opposed the bill, and now that it was made into law, they're trying to see how they might limit it.
Mm-hmm. Police have gone to some pretty creative lengths to do that. So far, judges have ruled against them in most of their lawsuits, but many are still in appeals. In Inglewood, where Keisha Michael was shot, the city council went even further, voting in the weeks before the law went into effect to let police destroy records older than 5 years, the minimum mandated by the state. James Butts, the mayor, says there's nothing to see here.
The police department just asked for a routine records reconciliation. This one, they went back and they cleaned out stuff that was there as far back as 1991.
Butts used to be the police chief in Santa Monica. He says he supports transparency. He just doesn't think there's much to gain from old records.
5 years of data, if you can't figure out what's going on with 5 years of data, you need another job.
What about the general public? Because obviously they have a stake here too.
Absolutely.
Don't they have a right to have information about the personal histories of officers or details about actual specific events?
So, you want like the straight answer or the politically correct answer?
I would very much like the straight answer.
The reality is the general public doesn't care about it. What they want to know is that the city governing body is hiring a police chief that is an expert, that is a leader, that knows how to run a police department. In 37 years in law enforcement, I have never found a member of the general public that said, hey, I'd like to know an analysis of use of force of officers. Never happened.
I mean, what about family members? We, for example, have met some of the family members of Keisha Michael, which was a pretty high-profile case. She was killed here by police. Yes. 5 of those officers have since been fired.
Well, actually, they were, when you say since been, they were fired well over a year ago.
That's right. It has been some time. And in a way, that's part of what's interesting about that case, because according to her family, they say they still don't really know exactly what happened to her.
I would find that fascinating. I have, first of all the condolences to the family, but they're represented by counsel. Counsel has had access to everything that the city has generated. So if they don't know, I would say that their attorney needs to share it with them.
The lawyer for the Michael family says that's not true. He believes they're still missing a lot, including any video from the scene and interviews officers gave in the internal investigation. The district attorney's office declined to comment.
Even though it took us a whole year and whatever months to go up there and fight and ask and keep asking and keep asking, we still don't have no answers, to tell you the truth.
Without that, Tricia says closure will be hard to come by.
Came into this world again. We did everything together. Just went to school, ate the same thing. it's hard. I've never pictured this, that I would live this life without her. It's a lot in me to go hard for mine, because it's a piece of me that's hurting, you know?
It's the end of the first week of March 2019. Another way of putting it, it's 606 days until the November 3rd, 2020 general election. So it's the perfect day to check in on how things are going in the Democratic presidential field. All told, there are now 14 Democrats actively running for president, if you count the ones with exploratory committees. Add in Beto and Biden and maybe a few others, looking at a possible field of somewhere around 20 candidates, or maybe a few less. That number, 20, is an important one, because that's the cap on participants the DNC put on the first two presidential debates in June. So set your TiVos to scintillating now. If you recall, the 2016 Democratic debates were a bit of a shit show.
What the DNC did arbitrarily, without discussing it with us, is shut off our access to our own information, crippling our campaign. That is an egregious act.
So Democrats changed the rules. To qualify for the first debates, the 20 candidates will need at least 1% support in a set of pre-approved national polls, or they'll have to have raised money from at least 65,000 donors. That donor list must include at least 200 donors in 20 separate states. The new DNC rules were hailed by just about everybody as open and fair and a vast improvement over 2016. And they certainly look set to allow for a lot more weirdness. Andrew Yang is a guy you probably have no idea is running for president. He's an entrepreneur whose focus is on a universal basic income. Yang's plan is for every American over the age of 18 to get $1,000 a month from the government just for being alive. Yang's campaign has at least 200 donors in 38 states, so that crosses one debate threshold. As of noon today, he had 52,502 unique donors. That's close to the other threshold. So it probably means he'll make the cut for the first Democratic debate, which leads us to the next wrinkle. 20 people is too many people to put on one debate stage. So Democrats are going to split the first debates in half. On night one, half the field will debate. On night two, the other half. Which night, which candidate takes the stage will be determined by drawing their names out of a hat. So you can easily get debates where the top two candidates in the polls don't debate each other at all. Good news for outsider candidates, which was the point. So how do you use that opportunity? I asked Notre debate prepper Seth Pendleton, who manages the process now for Democratic House races, how to use a debate to break out of a 20-person field.
Now, of course, there's that sense of, well, you know, sort of the Democrats and the established Democrats and the Kamalas and the, you know, the Cory Bookers and the Bernies of the world, they're known quantities. So there is going to be that sense of in the voter's mind, hey, who's this guy or who's this woman? Who is this person? I think people, especially this cycle, are becoming political consumers. And I think it's becoming, you know, sort of, you know, along with what's in our queue, I think this is going to be a huge part of the conversation, and I think people are going to want to take part in it. So there's not going to be anybody out there in the hinterland saying, gee, I wonder why this matters. No, everyone knows why it matters. Certainly this cycle, I'd rather be the Democrats than the Republicans.
When Justin Trudeau became Canada's Prime Minister in 2015, he also became a Liberal darling. In photo ops, he seemed like the nerd the left had been waiting for. A fighter with a soft heart, beloved despite his clumsiest attempts at wokeness. He got called the anti-Trump, though even a Trump would sometimes give him a pass. But now, Trudeau finds himself in the middle of the worst scandal of his career, which has seen him accused of interfering with a bribery investigation on behalf of a corporate giant. Yesterday, he addressed those charges.
In regards to standing up for jobs and defending the integrity of our rule of law, I continue to say that there was no inappropriate pressure.
Last week, former Justice Minister and Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould testified to Parliament that Trudeau and his staff, including his chief of staff, principal secretary, and 2 senior advisors, pressured her not to prosecute SNC-Lavalin, an engineering and construction company that allegedly bribed Muammar Gaddafi's government in Libya to secure lucrative contracts.
My response, and I vividly remember this as well, was to ask the Prime Minister a direct question while looking him in the eye. I asked, quote, "Are you politically interfering with my role, my decision as the Attorney General? I would strongly advise against it," end quote. The Prime Minister said, no, we just need to find a solution.
Part of the pressure is because SNC-Lavalin is based in Quebec, Trudeau's home province. The company denied the allegations in 2015.
The conversations that I had, where they became very clearly inappropriate, was when political issues came up, like the election in Quebec, like losing the election if SNC were to move their headquarters.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Wilson-Raybould very much for her testimony.
After Wilson-Raybould went ahead with the prosecution, she was demoted, and a month later, she resigned. Trudeau's opponents have seized on the scandal, calling for an independent investigation.
There shouldn't be preferential treatment given to powerful companies just because they have deep ties to the party that's in power. But really, what the scandals point to, more than just corruption, they point to the priorities of these governments. Both conservative and liberal governments have made it a priority to help out their friends and to help out those who are powerful and well-connected. And they haven't made it a priority to help out people that need it.
The entire affair puts Trudeau in a lose-lose situation. If SNC-Lavalin is prosecuted, it might leave Quebec and take thousands of jobs with it. If the company escapes sanction, Trudeau's reputation as the model liberal will take more of a hit than it already has. And that may make it harder for him to keep power in October, when he's up for re-election.
It's the 5th anniversary of the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, which vanished on its way from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing with 239 people on board. 40 minutes after takeoff, the Boeing 777 made an unscheduled turn and switched off its transponder, a device that communicates position. It's thought to have flown for nearly 8 more hours, but it was never heard from again. The flight's disappearance is one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern times, and a former lawyer from California has made it his mission to try and figure out what happened.
I love solving mysteries. That's my passion. I have been working on archaeological expeditions in Belize and Guatemala trying to find out what happened to the Maya. I traveled in Ethiopia looking for the lost Ark of the Covenant. However, Malaysia 370 is different from the others. This affects real people.
We just found on Riake Beach this piece of debris. We have not picked it up yet. We've taken some pictures. I will now.
Of the 32 pieces of debris in the debris report on Malaysia 370, I am at least partly responsible for 17. It was the oceanography and the analysis of currents and drift that told me approximately where to go. I found the first part in Mozambique. I was told that there was a sandbank off the coast where local people would go to pick up things that came from the open Indian Ocean. The boat owner actually was the first to see and touch no step panel. He picked it up, he called me over, he said, "Blaine, is this the plane?" There was one piece of debris that was being used by a little girl to fan a fire. She had found it and she was using it to fan the fire of the wood stove at the place where I was staying for breakfast. There was another piece that was being used as a washboard for washing clothes. it turned out to be the landing gear door. I do not have a theory as to what happened because I don't think we have enough evidence to know. However, some people get their pet theories, and they're very stubborn about it. For example, a lot of people argue that it was a controlled ditching suicide by the pilot. All these crazy theories that the plane is in the jungle of Cambodia, the Gulf of Thailand, the Bay of Bengal, Kazakhstan, or the deep southern Indian Ocean, intact, underwater after a controlled ditching, those are all disproven by the debris alone. The biggest piece recovered, and the most significant piece recovered. There is still, as yet, no absolute proof that the passengers were on board when it crashed. This is the typical hexagonal honeycomb from the recent Boeing manufacturers. So the family members who say, we're not ready to say goodbye until we know for sure that our loved ones are gone, they're right. I'm in Kuala Lumpur to attend the 5th year 370 Families commemoration. It was at the 1-year anniversary where I became inspired to go on my own private search for Malaysia 370.
Hi, my name is Rafael Areno, and my grandpa was on MH370.
People asked me, were you happy when you found a piece of Malaysia 370? Happy would be if I'd gone out to that sandbank and found 239 people grilling seafood, sipping on coconuts, saying, hey, what took you so long?
At 2 a.m. on Sunday, 48 states will spring forward into daylight saving time. The time change will give us an extra hour of sunlight in the evening, and late risers across the country think it should stay that way all year round.
I like the ticking. Lots of scientific research has made it clear that having sunlight in the afternoon is more important for Americans' quality of life, health, and safety than it is to have that sunlight at 6 o'clock in the morning when half of us are still asleep.
Steve Calandrillo has been studying the costs and benefits of daylight saving time and advocating for a permanent move to it for more than a decade. That once seemed like a quixotic effort, but no longer.
There is added momentum right now at this moment in our history towards having one time all year round.
Last year, Florida voted to put itself on permanent daylight saving time, while California voters passed a ballot initiative calling for the same. And at least 6 more states are currently considering DST bills. The one in Washington state was introduced by Jim Honeyford, who's worked closely with Calandrillo.
I'm very surprised at the number of people that don't want the time changes. They would like to stay on one time year-round, and that surprised me that it was that great of interest in that.
One way to get rid of a twice-yearly time change is to just stay on standard time. Arizona and Hawaii already do this, and 4 other states are thinking about it too. In fact, that was Honeyford's initial solution.
I got a lot of pushback on that because they like to have time to mow the lawn or whatever, playing with the kids in the evenings, and so I switched to staying on daylight savings time permanently. And I've had a couple 300 emails and letters favoring eliminating of the time switch, probably 5 to 1 favor staying on daylight savings time year-round.
Daylight saving time wasn't originally created to improve people's quality of life. It was introduced during World War I to save energy, and brought back during World War II for the same reason. After a stretch where some states used it and others didn't, it was made permanent by Congress in 1966 and extended an extra month in 2007.
The term standard time is really a misnomer. It's not our normal anymore. Almost 8 months of the year, we're actually on daylight saving time.
People's opinion of daylight saving time often depends on when they or their kids wake up. But permanent DST does have concrete benefits, like reducing the number of fatal car accidents.
The afternoon commute is also twice as dangerous overall as the morning commute because there's more alcohol in people's bloodstreams during the evening commute. The reality is that darkness kills, and darkness kills more in the evening than it does in the morning. If we can move 1 extra hour of daylight into the evening hours, we can save hundreds of American lives per year.
Preventing crime.
Criminals like to start their workday in the late afternoon and the evening hours, and they work into the late night. So by moving sunlight into the evening hours, you take away an hour from criminals' day.
Helping keep down lighting and heating bills, and later tea times. Still, even if states do pass year-round daylight saving time, there's one last bureaucratic hurdle. It takes a literal act of Congress for them to make this switch. Time for the pro-sunlight lobby to get to work.